Morning, church. Didn't have an opportunity last Sunday to report to you. On the 10th, we were able to go out to Eddie Warrior for our monthly baptisms, and we were able to baptize 25 ladies into Christ on the 10th. And then Henry was able to report to us on Wednesday night that they had a baptism out at Just Done. We went down, Carol and I did, to McAllister yesterday to get recertified to be able to go out to the prisons. And the chaplain who was leading our training there commented at the first of the class. He said, we now have statistical evidence that the spiritual work that's being done is making a difference in recidivism in our prisons. It's dropping. Now, it's not dropping dramatically. I wish I could say it was, but it is dropping. And they say there's a real correlation between that and the spiritual training that is being given to prisoners. So we appreciate God opening the doors of opportunity for us at Eddie Warrior and also at Just Done. And as always, if you'd like to help in that work and be involved in it, we would love to have you participating in that work. You can really make a difference in people's lives. We've been talking about the Ten Commandments in a series that I've entitled Father Knows Best, because I really believe He does. And this morning I want us to look at the fifth of those 10 commandments, which is this: honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Now, as we begin to discuss this particular passage, this commandment, let me make some observations about it. First of all, this is the first commandment dealing with our relationship with people. The first 4 commands touch on our relationship with God. You'll have no other gods besides me. I don't want you to make any graven images. I don't want you to take my name in vain. And I want you to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Those all have to do with our relationship with God. But starting with this 5th commandment, he shifts. And now he'll talk about our relationship with others and how we are to treat other people. The preceding commandment and this one are the only commands rendered in the positive rather than the negative. And I think that's kind of interesting. That is, he makes this transition talking about Sabbath and then talking about honoring parents, that in both cases these are stated in a positive way. The commands that follow, number 6 through 10, are all going to be don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But these 2 are stated in a positive fashion. Also, this is the first commandment with promise. And that's Paul's words in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 2. And of course, the promise is, if you'll obey your father and mother, this will allow you, in God's words, to live long in the land. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. It's interesting, there's no other command in the Torah, in God's law, demanding that we honor someone or something. Now, in a little bit, I'm going to quote a passage to you that will use that word honor in relation to older people, but it's a different word in the Hebrew and could be translated in a different way. But I think it's interesting that God says, I want you to honor your parents, not love your parents. And so I want to take a moment to talk about the importance of honoring our parents. The command here again is to honor parents, not to love them. And you say, well, that's kind of weird. No, I don't think it is at all. Because what God is stressing here is children's attitude toward their parents. I guess it's assumed, as it should be, that we're going to love our mom and dad. But it's incredibly important that we also honor them, that we respect them. The children of Israel were commanded to love God. Deuteronomy 6 verse 5, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. They were commanded to love their neighbor. Leviticus 19 verse 18, remember, love your neighbor as yourself. They are also commanded to love the strangers who dwelt among them. Leviticus 19:34. But we're commanded to honor our parents. There's a similar command found in Leviticus 19 verse 3. And notice the wording there. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and you shall keep my commandments, or keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Now, the word revere, we don't use that word a lot, okay, today. But when you talk about revering something, what are you saying? You're saying that you really hold that as precious, right? That it's very, very special. And as if re-emphasizing the idea of honoring, here he says, I want you to revere your parents. And don't forget, I am Yahweh your God. I have a right to command you to do this, and I'm telling you that I demand that you do it. You honor your parents. You revere them. Now, why the stress here on honoring our parents? As I was preparing this and doing some reading, I kind of paraphrased what one commentator wrote, but I think he really makes a good point. It would be nice if people loved the police or loved our president, but society only functions in a healthy way when these people are honored, whether loved or not. Now think about that. That is absolutely true. It would be a nice thing if we could say everybody loved the president or everybody loved the police, but the fact of the matter is that's not true. But the problem that exists in our culture today is not that these people aren't loved, it's unfortunately that these people aren't even honored. Whether you agree with the president or not, and I've had some presidents I agreed with, some presidents I didn't, I've always sought to honor the president. You honor the position. That's incredibly important. I think it's also important, whether you agree with everything that police do or not, that you honor the police. These men and women put on a uniform and go out there, and they literally will put their life on the line for you. They may give their life to protect you. That is certainly worthy of honor. They keep order and structure in our society. They protect us in a very, very important way. It really bothers me, and I'm sure it probably bothers you, as you see this honor breaking down. You see more and more criticism of anybody in a public office. You see more and more criticism of our men in blue and others in positions where they have to enforce the law. And what people fail to realize or don't think about is, if these positions aren't honored, if the role that these people fill isn't honored, ultimately what's going to happen is society is going to tear itself apart. And that's exactly what's happening today. And it's a shame and it's unfortunate, but it's a self-perpetuating problem. Criticism is one thing, but the destructive kind of stuff that's going on now is something else again. It is incredibly important that we honor those in positions of authority, and that starts with mom and dad. If parents aren't honored by their children, what's the family unit going to be like? It's going to be dysfunctional, isn't it? It has to be. And you can see this reflected. Go to Walmart and go down just walk down through the aisles and watch kids take Walmart apart. And what are mom and dad doing? Now stop that, now stop that, now quit that, now stop that. And the kids are doing what? Absolutely ignoring them and going ahead and pulling this stuff off the shelves and running around and screaming and carrying on. And what's happening? There is no respect of children for their parents. And I blame the parents because they're not demanding that respect and commanding that respect from their children. But the result is a dysfunctional situation. A situation that we increasingly see with kids out of control. Why? Because they don't respect their parents. And that's vital. Because as we're going to talk about, the home and the family is the foundation of our society. It's the basis upon which it's built. Now, Why is this command, honor your father and mother, why is this one of the 10 Commandments? And by the way, just let me make an observation here off to the side. Why did God pick these 10 things? You ever think about that? I mean, He makes this covenant with Israel in Exodus 19. He says, I'm going to be your God, you're going to be my people. The rest of the Torah, the rest of the law, over 600 different commands follow as God talks to His people about, now here's how I want you to behave yourselves, here's how I want you to conduct yourselves toward me and toward others. But He takes these 10 things and He engraves them on stone. And He hands them to the people and He says, these are at the core of our relationship. And as we talked about, 4 of them directly regard your relationship with me. 6 of them regard your relationship with each other. But bottom line, these 10 things are critical. And if you'll think about how our culture functions, if you'll think about how our society operates, Father knows best. He's dead on. As we talked about in our first lesson, what would this world be like if people just kept the 10 Commandments? I mean, it would be so incomprehensibly better than what it is now. It would be amazing, wouldn't it? It's heartbreaking when you think about what's happened to us because we have disregarded these 10 basic commands. That if people just followed the order, the structure, the security, the multiple blessings that would be involved in this would just be amazing. But God picked out these 10 things, engraved them in stone, and He said, pay attention to this. And it's not accidental that one of them is, kids, honor your mother and your father. Because again, that is foundational to our society. So is respect for one's elders. If children don't honor their parents, they're probably not going to honor God or honor anybody else. Let me give you a couple of other commands from the law that reflect this. Leviticus 19 and verse 32. You shall stand up before the gray head and honor the face of the old man, and you shall fear your God. I am the Lord. Another one too, which, wow. Whoever strikes or curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. Exodus 21, verses 15 through 17. I think one of the ultimate examples of a dysfunctional society, of a dysfunctional family, is when children begin to be violent toward their parents. Honoring parents, again, is a key to a healthy family. Healthy families are key to a healthy society. One of the characteristics of a sick society is children who are, this is Paul's words, Romans 1 verse 30, where he's lamenting the mess that is Roman culture. And as he describes Roman culture, he says one of the characteristics of Roman culture is children who are disobedient to parents. Why? Because that strikes right at the heart of an orderly, structured system. As Paul writes of those later on in 1 Timothy 1 verse 9 that he calls lawless and disobedient, he speaks of children who strike their fathers and mothers. 1 Timothy 1 verse 9. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. As I was doing a little background work in this and research, one of the stats that just jumped out at me and I was shocked by is this: 8 million children physically assaulted their parents last year. 8 million. Now we hear about parental abuse of children and decry that, and we need to do everything we can to stop that because it's so wrong on multiple levels. But I hadn't heard about how many kids are attacking their parents and physically assaulting their parents. And again, that's a reflection of a sickness that will ultimately destroy our society. There's a reason why, as we'll see in a second, that God says if you want to live long in the land, that is, if you want this nation to stay together, if you want it to function, foundational to that is going to be children honoring their fathers and their mothers. If they're not only not honoring their fathers and their mothers, but they're physically violent against their fathers and their mothers, God help us all. We find ourselves in a real mess. Now, how can we honor our parents? Let me suggest 3 ways real quickly here. First of all, I think we can honor our parents by conducting our lives in an honorable, godly way. You know, one of the things that strikes me as I do funerals is when I do a funeral for a man or a woman and they've lived a long, honorable, godly, respectable life. Their children, their grandchildren, their friends are proud of the life they've lived. And those individuals have left behind an estate, if you would, a spiritual estate, a moral estate of inestimable value, because they have left behind an example and a legacy of which they can be proud. I think equally important to all of us should be that we live lives that honor our parents. Lives that allow them to be proud of who we are and how we've lived and the example we've set. I believe we owe them that. And so you honor your mom and dad when you live your life in a way that is honorable and godly. Secondly, I believe you honor your parents by speaking of and to them in a way that is respectful. I've told this story before. When I was just, wasn't very old at all, 7, 8 years old. My cousins came over to play, 2 girls. And we were playing in the backyard, and when it came time to go, my Aunt Bonnie came out on the back porch, and she called to Carol and Mary, and she said, "Y'all come inside, it's time for us to go." And I distinctly remember those girls looking up at their mama and telling her to shut up. "We're going to keep playing. Just shut up, Mom. We're not done playing yet." And my Aunt Bonnie turning to my mom and saying, "Isn't that cute? Isn't that sweet? Did you just hear what they said? They just told me to shut up. Isn't that cute?" Now you see, I was waiting for him to be executed on the spot. Because that's what would have happened to me if I told my parents to shut up. I mean, there would have been blood on the ground. It would not have happened. Okay? And I was just shocked. Those 2 cousins both went on to spend repeated sessions in prison, to have miserable lives. And I have got to give a great deal of credit for that to my Aunt Bonnie. And the way she raised those girls not to respect her, not to respect people in positions of authority. It is important that children speak to their parents, I believe, and of their parents in a way that is respectful. My daddy spanked me a few times. There's only one other time he ever really got physical with me. We were riding along in the car. I was sitting in the back seat. And Dad was talking to me about going over to some kid. I'd ask him if I could go over to some kid's house. And he said something in response to that, and I smarted back at him. And the next thing I knew, this hand came flying across the back seat and the back of the front seat, and boom, right there, right across my mouth. And he sent me a message real quick saying what? "You don't backtalk me. You don't disrespect me. You don't do that. Now, that's an incredibly important lesson. And it's one that our children need to learn and that we need to practice in our culture, because when children don't respect their parents, when they don't speak to them in a respectful way, and this is just for what it's worth, it's a Dan thing. Does it make you uncomfortable when somebody's talking about their dad and they call him, and his name's Bob, and they just speak about Bob? You know, Bob and I did this, or Bob, instead Dad did this, or Dad did that. This just makes me uncomfortable, okay? And I really hate it when I hear kids running down their parents. Now, unfortunately, some parents don't set a good example. Some parents have betrayed their role, and that's absolutely true. And it's a shame that it's that way. But we, as much as possible, I believe it's very important that we speak of our parents and speak to our parents in a way that is respectful. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Yes, sir, no, sir. I really believe that's very, very important. And thirdly, as our parents age, if I can get my clicker to click, I think we show them honor by checking upon and caring for them as the need arises. Increasingly in our culture, as we live longer, and we do, a lot of us well into our 70s, 80s, 90s, there comes a point where the kids have to begin to take care of the parents. That's just the way it is. Roles kind of reverse. I think one of the most important ways that we can honor our parents is by giving them the care that they deserve and the care that they need. When Jesus is attacking the Pharisees for hypocrisy, if you'll remember, one of the things that he'll talk to them about is the fact that there are some who have come up with a little twitch in the law to try to give them an excuse not to support their parents. And he'll say to them, you ignore the weightier matters of the law when you do that. We have a responsibility, if we're going to honor our parents, to care for them as they age. It breaks your heart to go into a rest home and see folks in there who are never visited by anybody. And it's not that they don't have kids. Sometimes those kids are very close. It's that they never come to see them. That's a shame. If we're going to honor our parents, we need to see to it that our parents are cared for and watched over. Now, let me end with a blessing that's found in keeping this commandment. And I believe there are some blessings that are found in it. One thing is stable homes. One of the greatest gifts you can give your kids, beyond a shadow of a doubt, stable home. You can read any study you want by all these people that study this kind of thing, and they'll tell you that one of the keys to a young person having a successful life, and by successful, I mean that they stay out of jail, they're gainfully employed, they function well in society, is that they have a stable home. That's incredibly important. Keeping this command ensures that that stable home is going to be there, that stable environment is there. Good, healthy examples to emulate. I'm thankful for my mom and dad. I'm thankful for the example they set for me. I'm grateful that they expected me, demanded of me that I respect them and treat them in a respectful way and honor what they had to say. And we sought to do that with our four. And I pray that they'll do that with their children. That's incredibly important. The apple never falls very far from the tree. We need to give them good, healthy examples to emulate. And notice finally, and this I touched upon earlier, God says, you want to provide a foundation to a nation that will endure? Make sure that the family is a situation where children honor their parents. Where you have the foundation upon which society is built healthy and structured and functioning as God would have it function. Because again, I think it's very important. If those kids don't honor mom and dad, you teachers know they're not going to honor you at school. Police know they're not going to honor them. And we'll get to visit them at Eddie Warrior. And we'll get to go see them at Just Done, because that too often is where they're going to end up when they're not taught to respect people in positions of authority, where rebellion is encouraged instead of discouraged. It's so incredibly important that we do everything we can to honor this command as parents and as children, that we may live long in the land. This morning, if you want to honor your Father in heaven, there's no better way to do that, no greater way to do that, than by giving your life to Him. And if you haven't done so, you can do that right now, this morning. You can come before this group of people who love you and care about you and say, you know what? I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And you can be buried in the waters of baptism, and Scripture says you'll rise to walk in a new life. Okay? Because God will have cleaned you up, spiritually cleansed you of your sins, gifted you with His Spirit, made you His child. If you're struggling with things in your life and you need our help, our encouragement, our prayers, if we can help you in any way, won't you come while we stand and while we sing?